Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination News Network. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that we'll have a scintillating discussion this afternoon. Now, remember to like and share the videos as much as possible so that it will aid the algorithm to push the videos along. Now, some people are saying that sometimes when the videos are posted, they're not receiving them in their feed. Remember now that the algorithm lots of times do not send. They begin by sending it to a small segment, the videos that is, a small segment of the subscribers. Sometimes you don't even get post notifications. If you turn on your bell, you stand a likely chance of getting the video. However, the initial stages of the video, which is ironic, they don't send the post notifications to all subscribers. And then they use a small segment, that small demographics. And if people don't click, then they send back the video and say the video was not interesting and people won't watch the video. And that's so much, it's ridiculous the way how they're doing it. So what I would suggest that you do, ladies and gentlemen, I upload this video every day at 2 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. That's it. That would be 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can check your time zones to see what time it is in your neck of the woods, right? So as soon as the videos are published, try to go on my site at least 2 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time, 1 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, and you can check your time zone and begin to interact with the videos. Because if you don't, in the initial stages, YouTube is not going to send the videos to a wide audience and dispatch the videos to as many people on the platform. Okay. It is what they do. I don't see any logic in it, but that is what they do, and you can't argue with them here. You just have to follow what they do. And the algorithm changes every day. You can't keep up with what it does on this system. Okay, now today we're going to be looking at the topic US declares war is necessary for peace. The Caribbean is next zone of war, right? We are the next zone of war, and the United States too. But let us look at, in a stunning speech at Quantico, Virginia, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth declared that the United States must wage war to secure peace. You have to wage war to secure peace. Now, remember now that this is coming out of the playbook of 1984 by George Orwell, in which he suggests war is peace. Okay, so they're taking this from the same playbook, all right, or out of the same playbook. But what does that mean for small nations caught in America's orbit, especially in the Caribbean? In this video, I'll explore or expose how this new US military mindset could shape policies toward Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, Grenada, Guyana, and Venezuela, and the entire region under the banner of peacekeeping. Is this the Caribbean quietly, or is the Caribbean, I should ask, being quietly drawn into a zone of war? And notice here that coming out of the mouth of PM Kamala Bissessar, as she said, the speech that she pronounced at the United Nations, she was saying that we're not living in a zone of peace, that the Caribbean is a zone of war. And she believes that Trump's war on drugs is going to usher us into a world of peace, or into a zone of peace. And this really synchronizes, her speech synchronizes with Trump's pronouncement. Now, the speech at Quantico was pronounced on September 30th. September 30th. And I think you had the United Nations session, was it before or after? Can't remember. But the fact of the matter is that they are suggesting that they have to have offensive wars in order to usher in peace worldwide. That is what Trump and Pete Hegseth are suggesting, have intimated. And I think the Axios newspaper did summarize it well. I've read a lot about it, but I think of all the newspapers, they have summarized it the best, this Axios newspaper. And I wonder, why is it not coming up now that I'm online? You know, it's always problematic when you go online and you don't see what you had downloaded. Something always happens to prevent you. So Trump is suggesting that in order for peace to happen, to occur in the world, in order for us to have peace, we must wage wars. And you wage wars against your enemy. So they are going to have what we call them preemptive wars, wars in which you already see that or know that this person is an enemy and you have to get rid of this person. Right. And that is what Trump is doing. So, first of all, we're hearing that Nicolas Maduro is the person who is actually the warmonger, and he's the enemy of the United States and the region at large because he's sending what we call it now drugs to nations, and Trump is suggesting that Nicolas Maduro is responsible for the thousands of deaths in the United States, which is not true. All right, because we know that most people who die from drugs in the United States die from drugs like the fentanyl, right? And it's not produced in Venezuela, and it comes through the Mexican-American border. Okay, so that is not true that Nicolas Maduro is responsible for any lots of deaths in the United States. That is not true. Now, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth used a rare gathering of the country's highest-ranking military officials to outline their vision for a cultural and operational military reset on Tuesday at Marine Corps Base Quantico. Now, the reset, or that reset, which Trump's team has been laying the groundwork for since before he took office, included making the military culture MAGA friendly. So he wants to make this military into what you call it now, dominant force of the United States to crush enemies of the United States, as it were. Trump used crime as a pretext to deploy troops to Democratic-led cities. Hegseth, meanwhile, said he wants the U.S. military free of its woke shackles. Now, I read both speeches, and it is true, right? Now that he wants to deploy troops to Democratic-led cities. So he wants, well, already in Washington, D.C., he has threatened Chicago, Portland, New York, right? California, to send the troops there. Now, remember now that is unlawful. It's illegal in the United States to be using the Marines, not Marines, but the military on U.S. soil, except for extraordinary situations. And we don't see any extraordinary situations in New York or in Chicago or in Washington, D.C. or Portland or any of the major Democrat-led cities that he's talking about. Of course, they do have their problems. However, these problems are not extraordinary, in which the public order can't be maintained. Right? So it's interesting to see that Trump is using now crime as a pretext for war and waging war on Americans. So when we look at what is happening in the Caribbean, we are just outposts, as it were, of the US empire, or what is happening in the United States. And I've often said, and I went on a podcast recently, about 2 months ago, I should say, probably, or a month and a half, in which I was telling the hostess that for us to understand what is happening in the Caribbean, we must understand what is happening on the shores of the United States, in the empire, on the shores of the US empire. We have to understand. And she couldn't understand that. She believes that we are in, what should I say, control of what happens here. To a certain extent, we are. I'm not going to exaggerate now and say that Trump is in everything that happens here in the Caribbean. But the major events here and the major policies, yes, he has a lot, or the US empire has a lot to do with these policies, including what is happening in Grenada and Venezuela and right throughout the Caribbean nations and Latin American nations as well. All right? So can you imagine that the Posse Comitatus or Comitatus, however you pronounce it, the Posse Comitatus Act, I think that came into being in 1877 or 1878. I want to think it's 1878. You could check that. In which the United States, implemented a law in which it made it unlawful for the military to be used on US citizens on US soil. But Trump now is actually normalizing that illegal activity. He's making it known that he is now having a new doctrine, the Trump doctrine, which I think that is what Hegseth called it, the Trump doctrine. It's not Hegseth. One of his officials called it the Trump doctrine, in which Trump now is re-engineering, as it were, the entire American society, making it into a military one. So the Caribbean right now, Trump is also waging a war, because what he said in his speech is that we need to look at the enemies within. That's what he's saying, that he's pivoting to Asia. So in other words, the wars that were being waged in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, and other parts of Africa and the Middle East the wars have now been taken home. He's now waging that war to eliminate, as it were, all enemies from within, those enemies who are within, so that he can preserve peace in the United States and in the broader Americas, which include the Caribbean region. So whatever we're seeing, whether it is Trump requesting military base in Grenada or radar system be installed at the Maurice Bishop International Airport, or it is that he's asking Kamala Harris for bases to attack Venezuela, wherever it is on our shores, we have got to participate in that war, because it is a war that the US empire is waging. And notice also that I've read to you on many occasions, or I not read to you, but I cited from that statements from the article that was written by Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, the PM of Jamaica, in which he says he's waging a war on the gangs. And Kamala is also waging a war on the gangs, on the drug traffickers and the human traffickers, as she suggested. She said that these people have caused our people great harm, which of course they have, and we can't negate what she's saying. It is the method that we should be against. Let me repeat that. We are not against the reality that Dr. Andrew Holness and Mrs. Kamala Harris have pronounced. These realities are true. But we're having problems with gangs, we're having problems with drug traffickers and human traffickers. That is a fact. But how are we going to solve it? We can't solve it by waging war on them in the way that they're telling us to wage a war on them. First of all, we've got to see who is behind the drug war or the drug trade, the human trafficking industry. Who is behind it? We first have got to identify the culprits, and then we can wage a war on the culprits. But oftentimes the persons that we're waging wars on are not the real culprits. They're just participants in the trafficking of people or humans or drugs. Okay? And yesterday I was listening to a video by Matt, no, it's not Matt Taib, it's the Gray Zone editor there. What's his name? Max Blumenthal. Right, Max Blumenthal, in which he was suggesting, and he said very clearly and poignantly, that the United States does not want to destroy the drug trade. It does not want to get rid of the drug trade. It wants to eliminate people who are competitors in that trade. It wants to control it. That's what he said. Right? The United States desires to control it. That they will have no other competitor, be they Nicolas Maduro or the president of Colombia, that's Gustavo Petro. And I'm also suggesting that these people are involved. I'm just saying to you that the United States is securing its dominance in the trade, that she should be the only person to control. She should be the head of that trade and should not have any other competitor. Okay? So in every aspect, the United States is seeking full spectrum dominance. Very important that you understand, whether it's in arms trade, sadly to say, human trafficking, and the drug trade. Okay, we have to understand. So, but a war is being a silent war, and I'm not sure it's silent anymore. The war that is being waged on the Caribbean is open now. I don't think we can say that it's silently a war anymore. It's there to see. right? It's there to see, it's evident, it's palpable. All right. So we have to now begin to re-educate our minds as to what nations we're living in. Are we really free as we think we are? Are we really democratic? Are we living in democracies as we have been brainwashed into thinking? Now, if we think we're not living in democracies, then we have to what? Try to fight for democracies because freedom comes at a cost. Freedom is costly. I think we have grown up in the Caribbean and in the United States thinking that the process of freedom or freedom comes through osmosis. You don't have to work for it. Somebody in, our ancestors, they fought for it and we just automatically receive it. We don't, it's not an evolutionary process where it's a continuation of fighting. No, we think that we are free and we're free forever. And that is not true, right? We have to constantly be on guard. We have to be like watchmen on the walls of Zion as far as freedom is concerned. But many of us are not paying attention to what is happening in our world. Okay? Now, last month, this is what Trump is saying. Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. This is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. This is what President Trump says. Now, so we can see now the people in Trinidad and Tobago, they're saying that they can't protest now because of the state of public emergency. So even if they wanted to protest against what Mrs. Person Becesar is doing, they can't. And I understand, based on what I've read, that the state of emergency in Trinidad has been extended for another 3 months. So they won't be able to, even if there's a war, they can't protest. Trump is doing the same thing equally in the United States. He is, I think, seeing or foreseeing that there are going to be public disturbances. Look at what is happening in the United States, the lockdown, not the lockdowns, the shutdown, the government shutdown. Look at what is happening there. So if you should have now a protest, a mass protest in Washington, D.C., or in New York, or wherever, and you know the Democrats are the ones who like to protest, then you can use the military to quell those protest actions. This is what they are doing. And they know that people are going to be, angry at what is happening and would therefore want to protest, as it's within our rights, legally speaking, but they are right now in the process of changing those laws. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities, he's referring now to Democratic-led cities, as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but our military. Okay, because we are going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor, stupid governor, Trump explained. Now, we might be taking him and say this guy's nuts, okay? But these guys are serious. And he might not be speaking in the most eloquent manner, but he's representing the military-industrial complex with people who are sharper than he is, and he's just following their diktats. Okay? So, but they know they want to use a crude person like Trump to explain, and because he has no shame of explaining it, they might have a little bit more shame, and they might, even though they are the authors and the creators of it, of this policy, but they don't want to be the ones to articulate it. And even if they should articulate it to you, they would sound a little bit more refined, right? But yet it's still crude, right? It is crude. Now, he's saying here, America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. These are the words of the President of the United States. What invasion from within? No different than a foreign country or a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. And guess who are those? People like you and me, right? Dissenters. Those are the enemy within. You dare not say anything that opposes Trump's doctrine or Andrew Holness's or Kamala Harris' predecessors' pronouncements. Okay? You can't protest against what she's doing there in Trinidad. You can't. Or you are going to be put down. The military is going to be sent, right? To quell whatever protest you are doing. Okay. Now, so this is what Trump is doing. And he's saying that he doesn't want any more distractions. He doesn't want any more distractions. And they're saying, both Pete Hegseth and Trump are saying that they're moving away from political correctness. And I must say that America has long been, what is this thing about being politically correct? Sometimes you have to say it as it is. Some people are saying, Andrew, you're too clear on what you're saying. Tone it down. But the fact of the matter is that we have to say things as they are. We're growing up in a society in which people are pretending as things are not happening. And we have to say, we have to call a spade. Sometimes when things are at this very precarious point in which we find ourselves, we have to call a spade a spade. I hope I'm respectful. I hope that I'm kind enough, but we have to pronounce truth candidly and openly, which we are not so much accustomed to in our what we call this postmodern world. That's the expression. In our postmodern world, where truth is relative. That's what has happened to us now. We say now truth is relative. You speak your truth, and I'll speak my truth. And as a result of that, we're all deceived, and our leaders are controlling our minds. So Trump is now saying, let's call it, if we have to, and he says he's going to blast the hell out of the countries who do not accede to America's diktats. That's what he said in Japan, right? And now when we look at what is happening in the Caribbean with the brutal unaliving of, I have to even carefully choose my words because of the algorithm, they're controlling even the very use of our language. You can't use certain vocabulary or they're going to flag your video. Okay, that is how it's right now. So I have to be using choice words that they have told us to use, and it's killing me because you want to speak openly and freely. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that they're saying that every day when a speedboat is attacked and is struck, they just tell us that it has happened and how many persons on board and how many persons were unalived without batting an eye. Now, how can you do that? And these people are parents, they're fathers, and they don't have any sort of compassion and sympathy and empathy for fathers or for mothers who would have lost their children without any due process, without any form of due process. So this is what they're talking about. That is not, gone are the days when they would have to couch what they're doing under the realm of international law. And they would have to be careful of what they say and what they do, or they could be taken to court. That is different. We're living in different times. The president can do whatever he wants to do in the name of peace, security, and stability. In the name of peace, stability, and security. The president of the United States, and by extension, the presidents and the prime ministers in the Caribbean region, can do anything in the name of peace, stability, and security. Even if they do not permit you to have due process. Very important that you understand. And on Sunday, Mr. Pereira and Mr. Corbyn, Mr. Fred Corbyn of Barbados, we have Mr. Pereira from Guyana, they are going to be explicating on some of these very important matters because it is a speech, or these speeches, because one was pronounced by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. Notice he's not the Secretary, he's no longer the Secretary of Defense. He is the Secretary of War. And Trump is saying that they need to have war in that department, or to name it as Department of War, because when it was named under that department, because that was what it was called before, all right, that America won all of its wars. So America is now on a quest to launch wars on any nation that does not actually accede to its philosophy and its demands, including on Grenada, on Trinidad, on Jamaica, on Guyana, on any of us in Latin America and the Caribbean region. So we must sympathize with our prime ministers and the presidents because they can destabilize us and cause us serious damage, even though, as it says, damn if you will or damn if you don't. Because the fact of the matter is that if you do, you still are exposed to damage. And if you don't, you still. So we just have to say, if I'm damaged, I'm speaking the truth, I'm standing for that which is right. The question is, will we, the citizens of the Caribbean, support our prime ministers and presidents if they make the right decision, even though it's going to cause severe consequences to our economy, to our social lives, to our mobility? Maybe you're not able to travel to the United States, so just like Cuba, you might be isolated. They might, rescind all visas. Are we willing to go through? Because many of us are saying, no, they should not do that, and they should do this, or they should, we also have to look at the consequences. And I'm okay with that. I will take the consequences, but will you? Will you? Most of us won't. That's the truth. We like to talk, but when it comes on to action, when we can't go to the United States, when we can't get our Netflix and we don't have access to our phones and internet and everything that we have access to, we begin to crucify our leaders. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a coming live and an upcoming live on Sunday at 4 p.m. on my Rumination News Network. Be there, all right? Because we are going to be, expounding more on these matters, on the war on the Caribbean region, what you need to know, and some of the recommendations and how you can prepare yourself for it. Obviously, we won't be able to prepare ourselves for everything, just like a Category 5 hurricane that happened in Jamaica. They could not prepare for everything, and that's why you had death and you had great destruction, because there are some things we can't, it's beyond human power to do. But at least if they were not prepared, if they had no knowledge that it was coming, then you would have also more deaths and more suffering. So think about it in that way. So let us arm ourselves as much as possible with knowledge so that when the Category 5 hurricane lands on our shore, we can deal with it, at least psychologically, right? Because when the human spirit is broken, everything goes. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the video can be shared with as many people on the platform. For those of you who'd like to make a monetary donation, you can send it to my Cash App. And the address is the $MZ Talk. That's TUCK 9. The $MZ Talk. That's TUCK 9. Thank you so much for joining, and see you in another one tomorrow at 2 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ciao.